We're live. Whoa, welcome. This is an exciting day because we got some breaking news that we got to discuss. And today I got Franco Terrazzano. He's from the Canadian Taxpayer Federation. It is always a pleasure to have him onto the show because he's a wealth of knowledge. Absolutely love his content. So it's a pleasure. And then I also have Stacey, and Stacey is the person that is connecting the two of us. Without her, we wouldn't have this live stream. So thank you so much, Stacey. And she's going to bring forth some questions. I'm going to have some questions. We're going to ask you, the audience, questions. That's why we're doing the live stream, because it's great that we're part of a discussion together. Franco, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, man. A lot of shenanigans going on in Ottawa, so the circus is definitely keeping me busy.
Absolutely. We're going to get into it. And Stacey,
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I want to hear about all the shenanigans and like then the actions we can take, because I like to take actionable things that we can recommend people to do, because that's the problem with Canada. We're so in the dark. Right. And that's why we need Franco. And it's like the one, I'm going to toot your own horn because it's the one federation that is constantly backing its citizens, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. If you have to donate to them, because they're always defending Canadians, whether it's corrupt conservatives in the leadership, or it's corrupt liberals. They're constantly calling things out, and Franco works really hard to do it. And his time, he really only gives it to mainstream media. So we're so lucky that he gives it to us.
Yeah, and Stacey, thank you so much for connecting us.
It was like a nice little it was like a nice little shout out and then a little bit of a blast, but I love it. Stacey, thanks so much for connecting me and Mark. This is our second or third time that we've done this, but it's always a blast. I always have a good time.
All right, we should get right into it. We got people coming in, but we should start with the breaking news so we don't waste any time. Oh, all right, here we go. The intern, PBO, his contract it started in September. It ended March 2nd, so 2 days ago. They had 6 months to either rehire Jason Jacques, which he was fantastic. That's probably why they didn't want to renew his contract, but it doesn't matter because they had 6 months to either redo his contract or hire somebody else. Now, what I just found out today, which is incredible, is that Liberals tabled $500 billion worth of spending. At the same time, we find out that our parliamentary budget officer's contract is finished, and they didn't appoint somebody to replace him. This effectively is a scary situation for Canadians. So that's why I'm so excited to have you on, Franco. And I have posts from other people. I have a post from Yves Giroux, which was the parliamentary budget officer before. But I went back in history, and there is not one moment from my research that we had not had a parliamentary budget officer in service. There was temporary, but then they replaced the person. But there has been no time in Canadian history where a contract expired and there's nobody in this office. Is that's what I saw? Correct me if I'm wrong, Franco.
Yeah, I think it's for the last 20 years when the PBO was first implemented. I believe, was it 06? I can't remember the exact date, but it's been a long time. And hey, Mark, we can get into the main spending plan from the Carney government, the main estimates, where, by the way, folks, Carney's jacking up spending by another $18 billion this year, right? The banker was supposed to be better with the numbers than the drama teacher, but the banker is borrowing billions and billions of dollars more. But look, what's going on with the parliamentary budget officer is really a disgrace on the part of Prime Minister Mark Carney, right? Either it's just absolute incompetence, but what I actually think it is the Liberal government trying to avoid scrutiny, right? Because let's call a spade a spade. The parliamentary budget officer is like the one department or agency in government that is actually providing so much value for Canadian taxpayers, right? And Jason Jacques, he's awesome. I love the work that he did. I've had the fortunate opportunity to interview him in the past, right? But the PBO for years has been really good. Like Giroux, he was amazing as well, right? The PBO, they're the arm of government that called out Carney's creative accounting, right? Relabeling tens of billions of dollars of operating spending and putting a capital spending sticker on it. The PBO was the organization that cut through Trudeau's carbon tax spin. Remember, Trudeau used to say, oh, don't worry, folks, you pay the carbon tax and the rebates are going to make you rich. It was the PBO's numbers that sliced through Trudeau's spin, the fatal blow to the carbon tax. It's the PBO that showed Canadians that the cost of bureaucracy went up 80% in 10 years. Disgusting. It's the PBO that showed that government departments can barely meet half of their own performance targets every year, yet these government executives stuff their pockets with bonuses, nearly all of them, every single year. It was the PBO that, called out the government for the cost of the hidden carbon tax through fuel regulations that is still making our life more expensive, right? The PBO is like one of the main organizations that is actually providing true transparency and accountability for taxpayers. And Mark, to your point, like Carney had months and months and months to figure this out, to hire a replacement. But not only that, when the government did put up a job posting, in that job posting, they're looking for a budget officer with, quote, tact and discretion. Okay. That tells me that the government is trying to send a chill to whoever does become the former PBO to, just walk the tightrope, if you know what I'm saying.
Unbelievable. So let's take a look at this. So we got a post here. It says, Yves Giroux says the government's failure to appoint a new parliamentary budget officer after both his and his intern successor term expired is a conscious decision to silence the office and prevent it from holding the government accountable. Holy crap. That is insane. Because this is the former parliamentary budget officer posting this and saying this to Canadians, that it's a conscious decision.
This is a 5-alarm fire. Like, this is not a little thing. Like, it is the PBO that provides all this accountability. And the thing about the PBO and even the former PBO, like making those comments, this isn't a partisan. This is not an activist. This is the former parliamentary budget officer, right? Yeah. So that's just how damning those quotes are. And you remember Jason Jakes, right? He was in committee. He was calling the budget numbers stupefying, unsustainable, something's going to break. Everybody should be concerned. Well, here's a message to the liberal politicians out there and Mr. Carney himself. If you don't want people calling your budget stupefying, stop producing stupid budgets, right? Like, that's the main thing. These guys should be cutting spending and cutting the debt. They shouldn't be cutting the budget watchdog.
Absolutely. I agree. This has never happened before in Canadian history. Let's take a look at your tweet you did yesterday. I quite liked it. It was, they could cut the budget deficit, but it sure looks like they rather cut the budget watchdog. And I have to completely agree with your analysis there. That's what it appears to me, at least.
And hey, let me add the point because I feel like I skipped over it. So folks, just mechanically, without the parliamentary budget officer, that whole office doesn't produce reports and it doesn't continue its analysis, right? So that's the big issue here. Without having the formal parliamentary budget officer role being filled, it means that PBO, that office that does all these great reports from, slicing through carbon taxes to slicing through Carney's creative accounting, none of that stuff is happening. And Mark, as you brought up, the main estimates was just released, right? The government's main spending plan for the next year. Well, typically you would have a PBO report coming out saying, this is actually where your money is going. This is what the government claims, yet this is what is actually happening. But we're not getting that report on the government's main spending plan for the upcoming year because we don't have a PBO, because Carney didn't bother to fill the role.
You know what's concerning to me is if they didn't fill the role, they're coming out with all these spending numbers. How long would it take for them to review the numbers if they hired somebody?
Oh, that's a good question, right? Because you would imagine now there's just going to be a backlog of things that they have to do. So I hadn't even thought about that. But Mark, that's a really good point, man. Yeah, really.
So even if they hired somebody today, it might be too late. I mean, they're going to be pushing these numbers out, and then we got to approve this thing. So either way, this is a disaster that could have been avoided. And I believe for them to go through both these PBO reports, they're in depth. I actually read the reports when they come out because I'm a numbers guy, and they do a fantastic job. This type of stuff can't be created in a day. Like, it takes months for them to create these reports.
And they're the ones who are supposed to have access to the actual department spending plans, right? So like an outside observer, you can file access to information requests, but like you might get some number back in like 60 days, right? That is the whole point of having a parliamentary budget officer, like an independent office within government that is actually able to get the data from the department so that it can release those numbers to the public. Whereas if you're on the outside, if you're like one of us, you can go through the access to information process, which the Canadian Taxpayers Federation does all the time, but you're not getting that in-depth look behind the curtain on what's going on in government, right? You're not getting the full picture within that black box of Ottawa to actually know how that spending is going on. That's why it's so important. So let me say two things. It's so important to, create the pressure to force Carney to, hire a PBO. But let me say the second thing too, right? So right now, the Conservatives, I've seen them on social media. I've seen them blasting Carney for not hiring a PBO. But we have to make sure that the Conservatives stay on that track, right? Because you can imagine that if you're in the opposition, you like the PBO now, but then fast forward maybe after the next election, if they become power, well, they might not be so inclined to have that PBO there.
So maybe Franco, I can ask you, how do we put pressure on? I also noticed, so he just releases the budget in the November, and then immediately they're assessing it, and he's panicking. So they're just letting the position, slide out, basically. So how do we get the PBO back besides depending on the Conservatives?
Well, I don't think it's just on the Conservatives. I think you got to keep the Conservatives in support of a parliamentary budget officer. I think that's one angle. But look, I think that you can have, I think that we can pressure Carney into rehiring a PBO. I'm actually confident we can. So this reminds me, you go back to just after the election, and the finance minister, Champagne, he said there was going to be no budget in 2025. And then there was this massive media pressure. I mean, we jumped on this right away saying, are you kidding me? Like, there has to be a budget. Like, what are we talking about here? So I think with Carney, we're going to have to put pressure through the media to force them to, get off their butts and get this thing done. Very similar to the way that we were able to force them to actually release a 2025 budget. Now, the 2025 budget from Carney was a dumpster fire, but could you imagine how embarrassing is a bad word, but can you imagine how brutal it would be if we just didn't get a budget from a federal government that year?
But didn't we get a budget at the end of the year for the money that they had already spent, but they're telling us they're going to spend?
Well, we got a budget for the year heading into 2026, what they're going to spend in this upcoming year.
Okay.
So what I find amazing and troubling is that we elected this banker that's supposed to be this economic genius. He comes in. He shows up for 3 weeks in Parliament, then takes 3 months summer holidays during the biggest crisis in Canadian history, comes back. We thought we'd get this amazing budget. It's a dumpster fire, and they delivered it in November, almost a full year late. And now we find out we have zero parliamentary budget officer, and they're tabling a new budget. This is insanity.
Yeah, well, you know what though too, right? Sometimes when you're smart, you kind of figure out ways to be a little sneaky, if you know what I mean, right? So look, one of the things that Carney's doing, and so much kudos to Jason Jakes and when he was the PBO, because he's the one who called him out right away. So a sneaky thing that Carney's doing, folks, is he split the budget in two, right? An operating budget, day-to-day spending, and a capital budget, And what Carney told Canadians is that he was going to balance half the budget, balance the operating budget, right? He said he would do that by 2028. So what he did was he essentially tried to sell Canadians on this idea that he was cutting the wasteful spending to balance this operational budget. But what he actually did is he took tens of billions of dollars of what should be operational spending and then just stuffed it into the capital column. And it was the parliamentary budget officer who called him out, said he's using an overly expansive definition of capital spending, and that in fact, $94 billion of Carney's capital spending is really operational day to day. And that Carney wouldn't even come close to balancing the budget years from now if he used the proper definition of capital. That was the big groundbreaking report that the PBO put out, and that I'm sure everyone in Carney's staff was kind of losing their minds over. Because look, the PBO called Carney out for creative accounting. There's no other way around it.
So without a PBO scrutinizing the deficit and spending, for taxpayers and parliamentary oversight, is there anybody looking at these numbers aside from the opposition? Like there's just, we have is the PBO. Am I correct?
Well, I mean, within government, you have the parliamentary budget officer, right? Outside of government, you essentially have citizen journalists like Mark. I see you posting this stuff all the time. I see lots of other citizen journalists posting this frequently as well. Of course, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, like we're always looking at these types of numbers, doing our best to get it out there. You have some people in the mainstream media who are looking at stuff like this. Brian Lilly, Brian Pacifume, a couple of those guys come to mind. I know I'm missing some other people, but yeah, here's the problem is that you don't have that independent arm within government now actually looking at these numbers. And Mark, like as good as some of your posts are where you're like going into these reports, none of us have access through the black box that is the government, right? Like even when we're pulling on the strings, that's only like a small fraction of what's actually going on, right? It's like an iceberg. You see the tip outside of the water, but then the real big mess is underneath away from everyone's eye.
What I don't understand is why they couldn't do a week or month to month or week to week. Like there should be a rule inside the government that you can never have this position expire, like have a month to month until a temporary person is replaced with another 6-month contract, a year contract, or, just have somebody in place no matter what, so that this type of thing can never happen, because it's never happened before. But now we have this liberal government that wants to take zero accountability, and they're actually letting this happen for the first time in Canadian history. And I think the rules need to be changed immediately.
Yeah, I agree. And hey, I mentioned a couple journalists. Let me just give another hat tip, because actually this is probably one of my favorite outlets, Blacklock's Reporter. I don't know if you guys have heard Blacklock's Reporter, but they're like a great online investigative news site. And just want to give them a hat tip because they do great work. But today I read one of their stories, and it was showing that even a parliamentary committee passed a motion that cabinet rejected, but it was essentially to speed up the process of hiring a new parliamentary budget officer. And this was all done in November, right? So like, it's not like parliamentarians weren't talking about this. This was directly from the top that didn't get it done, right? This is from Carney and his ministers. Yeah, this is from Carney and his ministers. Yeah. Right. So it's not like there were politicians, like give credit to the Conservatives, the Bloc Québécois were pushing on this. No, this comes from Carney and his cabinet ministers and staff around him, I'm assuming. Even the senators, right? Even the Senate Finance Committee, again, this is from the Blacklock story that I was referencing. Even the Senate Finance Committee, I think, adopted a motion or made some type of recommendation to just extend Giroux's contract, the former PBO.
Yeah. And you know what? I think the best thing that Jason Jacques ever said in his short time as PBO is exactly what we should be using right now, where he says, well, we're going to take a look at what he says, but the situation we're in without a PBO, let's take a look at what he said. And I mean, it's just perfect.
Should be very alarming.
Very alarming.
Right? These are, I don't know, I think I used the words in French, which the translators probably got really well, like stupefying, shocking, right? This is not, like, it's not a funny fiscal outlook. It's a really serious fiscal outlook. And we don't lightly use the word unsustainable. right? Unsustainable means you don't have the option of saying, maybe I'll wait a couple of years, I'll see how things go. It means if you don't change, this is done, right? So it's very serious.
Was that his final speech?
Yeah, no, so basically stupefying. I mean, not having a PBO is stupefying, and having, like runaway deficit that they've basically, since the Liberals took power, I mean, they doubled our national deficit. We're wondering why we go to the store and look at the price of meat or price of anything, coffee, and they blame it on, climate. They'll blame it on, wars. But then when you look at the numbers, 7.3% in Canada and 2.9% in the United States, they have the same weather as we have. So,
Mark, there's one reason why inflation is out of control. One, money printing.
Yeah.
Central banks printing up money out of thin air and dumping it into our economy. I got to go back to COVID, because what happened during COVID, I don't know any other word to describe it other than insane. Okay. So what happened that was much different than COVID is this. And let me just backtrack. And if I'm rambling, bring me back to reality. But here's how a government normally finances its spending, right? Either through taxes or borrowing, right? And borrowing is just taxes plus interest tomorrow, right? Now, during COVID and in some other years, but what really happened during COVID is the other way to essentially finance deficits, and that's the money printer. And the Bank of Canada, the Government of Canada's central bank, printed up more than $300 billion out of thin air, okay? And the reason that this leads to inflation is very simple. Think about it. The government can print new dollars out of thin air with the click of a keypad, but you can't print up new homes. You can't print up new farmland. You can't print up bananas, apples, and mangoes out of thin air. No. So the government printed hundreds of billions of dollars and then dropped it into an economy that was going through revolving lockdowns. And guess what happens? You create the perfect storm for inflation. Too many dollars chasing too few goods. That is the inflation tax, where the Bank of Canada essentially prints up all this new dollars out of thin air to finance Ottawa's out of control deficits. And it is the reason that you see inflation continuing to go up, or at least inflation reaching a 40-year high in 2022, I believe, and yet prices are still out of control, right? Like taxes, they influence prices, obviously. Regulations influence prices, obviously. Even shortages influences prices as well in certain sectors. But the steady drumbeat of higher prices is because of one factor, and that is government money printing.
I completely agree with you. And, people realize, I always say this every single day, we have the second largest landmass on planet Earth. We have the number one amount of fresh running water. We have third amount of oil reserves on the planet. We have absolutely everything the world needs and wants. Yet we are in full decline year over year. I was born in this country. My parents, one parent needed to work, have 4 children, and you'd be able to go on vacation, buy a detached home. You would be able to afford all of the necessities on one salary. Now, parents both need to work, send their kids to daycare. Some parents work multiple jobs. You don't even see your family, and you still cannot afford a Tim Hortons coffee once a week, because it's just unbearable how expensive life is in this country. And it's all because of our management, poor management from the top. And they're trying to tell us that we have to sacrifice more, and there's no plan. Like when I see Mark Carney come out, he doesn't have a plan saying, we're going to be rich again. No, it's sacrifice more with Mark Carney. He never says that we're going to turn this thing around and become one of the richest countries on planet Earth. I've never heard him say that before. He just talks about, we got dental care for you. We got childcare. These are great things, but if you don't get out of the way and allow us to prosper. So I'd like to see in Canada, and this is for the population, forget the government. We need to dream bigger and demand more. They want us to dream very, very small and say, you know what? Accept that you have to work 3 jobs in order to get a 2x2 apartment and not be able to afford steak. Accept that. No, we're not accepting that. From now on, we're going to start dreaming big and start saying that we want to have only one income and be able to raise a family. I just saw this morning, when I woke up this morning, and I couldn't believe my eyes, but I could believe it, is that 100% of population growth in Canada is from immigration, 0% from actual Canadians. Unbelievable. That is a failure. That is a huge failure. You're telling me that Canada is dying. That's what it means.
They're being destroyed. Right? So that's another target. That's another conversation.
I apologize. I had to go on a small rant there, but that's how I feel, right?
Mark, and let me add, because you mentioned immigration, but let me add another, let me say this correct, because this is, I think, very important. So you get these economic indicators, whether it's population, GDP, jobs numbers, right? Well, one of the things that is juicing up the jobs numbers, making Canada's economy, and look, everyone knows that Canada's economy isn't firing on all cylinders, right? Unless you're like paid for by the taxpayer, you know that Canada's going through some really tough times. I think that's very clear. Well, one of the things that makes Canada's economy look like it's doing better than what it actually is government jobs, right? Like if you look at StatsCan data, more than 1 in 5 Canadian workers are government employees, or on the taxpayer dime, right? So taxpayers are now directly paying for 1 in 5 Canadian workers. But it's not only that, because that only accounts for bureaucrats who are directly paid by the government. That doesn't include the consultants, the corporations, the lobbyists, who also get subsidized from the taxpayer dole. Do you know what I'm saying? So the government and governments, it's not just the feds, it's also provinces and municipalities, have just massively ballooned the bureaucracies to such an extent that now 1 in 5 Canadian workers are on the taxpayer payroll. And of course, this makes Canada's economy look like it's doing better than what it actually is, right? It's a huge artificial, I don't even want to call it a boom, because it is artificial, but it makes, it allows these people to go on TV to claim that Canada's economy is doing a lot better when everyone outside of this Ottawa or government elite bubble knows that it's not.
Yeah, and I saw 2 parts there. Is the average pay is $147,000 for one of these government workers, which is astronomical.
That's how you make good little soldiers, though, right? Good little obedient government
147,000, and I don't want to even know how much vacation they get for.
And that's from the parliamentary budget officer, right? That number is from the PBO. That's how important the PBO is, because nobody would have any idea that the average full-time federal employee, their average compensation is over $140,000 a year. Nobody would have any idea if that number even exists if it weren't for the parliamentary budget officer.
And you, and the Canadian Taxpayers Federation.
Well,
and I don't know if people know this, but yeah, exactly. We love your work. I don't know if people know this, but it takes 4 private sector jobs to pay for one of their government job, or it might be more. I'm not too sure, but it's 4 to 1, 5 to 1. I mean, the government worker doesn't create new anything. It just creates, it creates a service, yes, but it doesn't create a brand new car. It doesn't create anything.
It's the makers versus the takers. That's what it is. And look, I hate that we have to talk about it this way, but I'm so fed up. And look, I know it's not just the federal government, but I'm so fed up with this government entitlement culture in Ottawa. I'm so fed up with it, where everyone within the government set thinks they're entitled to take more of your money just because they're on the taxpayer payroll. And look, the obvious cost is the bureaucracy, where they're now consuming more than half of the government's day-to-day spending, where 98% of government executives give themselves bonuses, right? Despite barely meeting half of their own performance targets, right? Then there's the Governor General, a completely ceremonial role who takes a pay raise every single year. The Governor General's salary is now about $400,000, right? On top of the salary, a governor general gets to bill taxpayers $130,000 for their clothes. Okay. Isn't that gross? Like, I know parents, young parents who are very close to me, who are honestly worried about how they're going to afford necessities like clothes for their children, right? So I know a lot of Canadians are worried about the price of clothes. I think I can go on a limb here and say the governor general isn't one of them, right? Her salary is about $400K. She can pay for her own clothes. And then when the governor general leaves office, after working for just 5 years, and I say working in quotes for 5 years, she gets an annual pension of $150,000. Like, it's this type of government entitlement culture that just drives me crazy. And Mark, you just mentioned that a couple months ago, Prime Minister Mark Carney told Canadians to brace for sacrifices. Well, when are they ever going to brace for just one iota of sacrifice?
And before that, Freelance said the same thing, right? Cut off your Disney channels and you have to sacrifice. That's what they want from you.
I think I saw the governor general go to Las Vegas and bill taxpayer like $24,000 for a pool party where the Red Bull was like $30 a Red Bull or something insane.
I don't know if that too.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Oh yeah, and billed the taxpayer for Red Bull at a pool party with champagne.
I know the governor general, because this was us who got those records. We found that the governor general on a 4-day trip to Iceland billed taxpayers $71,000 for a limo service.
Are you serious?
4 days, 71 grand. The hotel was a 10-minute walk away from the main conference center. And, we crunched the numbers. It would have been cheaper for the governor general just to have bought a brand new BMW.
Right.
Like it's nuts.
Unbelievable. You know what? Since we're fired up, let's take a look at this, Franco. Here we go. What is this?
Oh, Metrolinx. Okay,
Yeah.
So I actually don't know. This is so funny. So my colleague, Noah Jarvis, he's our Ontario director. He was just telling me about this report he's working on with Metrolinx. I honestly don't have any more details just because I don't really dive into the Ontario books too much. But what did he say there in his tweet?
So it says that they're burning $100 million for this Metrolink. It says the $100 million that won't go towards building schools, filling potholes, or cutting taxes. The $100 million is for 2 train stations that will likely never be built. Ontario's Auditor General needs to launch a full investigation into this debacle.
Well said, Noah.
Because they want to add on 2 more stations to the end of it. It's going to take another 10 years and another $10 trillion. Is that it?
Well, it says that it's never going to be built. $100 million. Imagine how much money that is. I mean, that would probably feed the 10 million Canadians that have food insecurity. Probably feed them for a while,
How much was it? 100 million? Let's just do some quick math here.
Right? They've already built a couple of it, which took 10 years.
I mean, that's like 5, that's almost 6,000 families' grocery bills for an entire year. So, I mean, yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. I agree, though. Let's get the Auditor General. I think Noah is absolutely right. I think you got to open up the books. Let's see what's going on.
So there's another thing that I wanted to talk to you about. I know it's small, but Italy calls for the suspension of EU carbon taxes.
Love it. You love to see it. I love to see my distant cousins absolutely railing against carbon taxes across the pond. I love it. Look, carbon taxes are a huge scam. Okay, it's essentially a way to try to control people's behavior. Right, a carbon tax is essentially do what we say or pay. Right, we don't like the way you live. Either stop living that way or pay up. That's what a carbon tax is. And like carbon taxes, they're not this environmental solution, right? All a carbon tax does is make your life more expensive. So it's good to see like you're finally starting to get some European countries push back against the carbon tax scam. It's good to see. But look, here in Canada, we did defeat Trudeau's consumer-facing carbon tax, right? The one that you saw whenever you paid your natural gas bill, for example, the one directly paid at the gas pumps. But Carney still is imposing 2 hidden carbon taxes, right? There's that hidden carbon tax buried in fuel regulations, currently costing us about 7 cents a liter of gas. But then potentially more damaging, There's a hidden carbon tax on Canadian businesses like steel companies, like fertilizer plants, like utilities, like refineries, like oil and gas companies. And, I'll state the obvious. Look south of the border, and what do you not see? You don't see any national carbon taxes in the United States, right? And that's not just under President Trump. That was also the case under the Democrats, like Biden, or like Obama, or like other Republicans like George Bush, right? Regardless of who's in the White House, they're not imposing carbon taxes. So think about it this way, right? Where you have, let's call it a fertilizer plant in Manitoba. Well, they get hammered by carbon taxes in Canada, or do they just go south of the border to the Dakotas and increase production down there, right? So this hidden carbon tax that Carney has in place on Canadian businesses, it pushes our entrepreneurs to cut production here and set up shop in the United States.
So I've looked at all this carbon tax nonsense. It really hasn't made a difference in our carbon emissions in Canada. If you look at the US, they've actually been able to reduce their carbon emissions year over year without a carbon tax. And it's because they focus on innovation. Think about this. If you're able to cut the amount of energy you use to build something through innovation, not only do you save money, but you lower your emissions. That's the focus that Canada needs to be focused on, is if we actually got out of the way and didn't choke out our industries, because guess what? Industries look at Canada and go, why would I go there when they're charging all of these taxes if I could just go in the US and then send Canada the finished product? Imagine that.
Yeah, I mean, even if you did reduce emissions in Canada, how much emissions are you reducing when a business just leaves and sets up shop in the United States or China, right? How much emissions are you actually reducing, right? Like, look, making it more expensive for a senior who's living on fixed income in Victoria, or maybe not Victoria, but like Calgary, right? Making it more expensive for a senior who has to pay their natural gas bill in Calgary. Well, does that reduce emissions in a place like India? No. Making it more expensive for that college student in Coquitlam to be able to afford groceries, does that reduce emissions in a place like Oklahoma? No. Okay, well, making it more expensive for that mom to drive her kids to soccer practice in like Port Hope, does that reduce emissions in Moscow? No. Right? All it does is just make it more expensive for people to actually survive here in Canada. That's all it's doing, right? And let's not forget, like, you look at the government's own emissions numbers, Canada makes up less than 2% of global emissions. So, like, what are we doing here? Right? It's just Ottawa punishing people.
That's what I was going to say. If they really care about the environment, then they boycott countries that are polluting the environment more, and not making, like I have to say, like India and China, and not making agreements with them and, deals with them.
Well, Mark, do you have that Twitter post that like went viral? I feel like it was a story from Bloomberg that showed what was it like LNG flowing essentially around the continent to the east coast of Canada. Do you know what picture I'm talking about? Like, how is that for emissions? Do you think that's very good for emissions? Like, if only we had pipelines, right? Like, come on. Like, that to me was like, it was a perfect picture of the insanity and complete clown world decisions coming from Ottawa.
Are we now buying oil? Wasn't it that now we're also going to buy oil or something from India instead of getting it from Alberta?
There it is. Look at this.
25,000 kilometers. You can't pick a further country, by the way. There's no possible way. And just so people are aware, they had to burn like 5,000 tons of bunker fuel, one of the most dirtiest type of fuels. Costs like some. So this is a $40 million shipment, and it costs $5 million worth of fuel that they burned. And that's just one way. And get this, supposedly people started doing some digging going, this makes zero sense. There's got to be a reason. Supposedly the LNG was tied to Brookfield, which is disgusting.
Of course it is. Well, that's what I think the underlying thing is. Everything is that he really is paying his duty to his allegiances are to Brookfield. They're not to Canadians. And I think that's pretty obvious.
Absolutely right? Disgusting.
Do you not agree,
on this topic?
I just don't. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, do you not agree that his allegiances are to Brookfield? They're not to Canadians.
Well, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't know. I'm not inside his head. But what I can say is like, the approach that I like to do, and maybe you can kind of criticize me on this, but I just think it's the approach that I like to take is I like to just say, like, here's what they say is going to happen. And then what's the effect, right? So, for example, we were just talking about carbon taxes. And Mark, like British Columbia, for example, right? The first place to have an economy-wide carbon tax. They said emissions were going to go down. Well, emissions went up, right? So I like to just take the approach, like, I don't know what's in someone's head, but here's what they say, what happens. Or Carney saying he's going to balance the budget or operating budget by 2028. Well, no, the PBO shows that you're going to have an $18 billion deficit. So you failed by your own admission. Or like, I look at these government departments that meet just over half of their own performance targets. And it's like, well, you can barely pass your own tests. Why are you giving yourself like $201 million in bonuses? Right. So that's kind of the approach that I like to take. Like, I honestly don't know what's going on in any of these politicians' heads. And honestly, like, I don't really care. Right. Like, I just want them to do the right thing and stop taxing people so much and stop wasting people's money. But like the approach that I like to take personally when scrutinizing policy is I just like to say, here's what you said. Did you succeed or did you fail by your own measure? Because if you failed by your own measure, I'm pretty sure it's a failure.
Right.
So I got a short clip. I think this one's pretty valuable about the LNG. So we'll just watch it quickly.
For over a decade, your Liberal government has been telling Canadians that there's no business case for LNG and no need for LNG infrastructure in this country. During that same period, the United States increased its LNG exports from roughly 500 million cubic feet per day to more than 15 billion cubic feet per day in 2025, becoming the world's largest exporter of LNG energy. Senator Moreau, Canada is home to one of the largest natural gas reserves in the world. Yet our overseas shipment of Canadian LNG occurred only 7 months ago. Why did your government dismiss the business case for Canadian LNG now for over a decade, putting us in the hole, putting us behind other competitors, and now all of a sudden being boxed out of the international market?
I think that the business case of the Prime Minister concerning trade diversification is very, very good.
Very, very good. Oh my, the guy that they have there, he always he just reads the paper because I don't think he knows what he's even reading, because he always just says, oh yeah, we're doing such a great job. The house could be burning behind and he's like, oh, it's not on fire. That's just like a candle.
Hey, you know what I think about some of this stuff too? My first thought is, who cares if a politician or a government bureaucrat thinks there's a business case or there isn't a business case? Like, who cares? It shouldn't be up to a politician or a government bureaucrat. Does the market, does the business think that there's a business case or not? Like, I don't care what one of these members of parliament or one of these bureaucrats think there's a business case for this, there's a business case for that. The government shouldn't be in the market of choosing business winners and losers. Like, get these government bureaucrats out of here. Get these politicians out of here. They shouldn't be handing out corporate welfare. They shouldn't be putting up regulations that stall something because they think there is no business case. Like, at the end of the day, like, I really don't care whether a politician thinks there is a case or there isn't a case. It shouldn't be up to a politician whether that business is allowed to make that investment. Do you know what I'm saying? Do you think I'm off base? What do you think about that?
No, I totally agree with you. Actually, on that note, let's take a look at a tweet that you just published here. The MPs, another big pay raise. So it looks like they're going to be getting a pay raise range from $8,800 to $17,600. Are you getting a $17,600 raise this year?
No, certainly not. And I'm definitely not taking any money from taxpayers, right? Which is the key point there. But this one drives me nuts, because I was just talking about this government entitlement culture. Hey, why is there just one member of parliament? Why is there just one who's publicly opposed the raise? Right? Why is it just Mike Dawson, the courageous conservative MP from New Brunswick, who's opposed it? Where are the rest of the parties? Right? Why aren't the rest of the parties opposing the MP pay raise? Look, let's call out all the major national parties out.
By the way, he got a lot of heat from everybody, including the Conservatives, for that. And then because of that, I published stuff. I know Mario Zelaya also, like, we supported the decision to do that, saying this guy he's honorable. I mean, Matt Generous said he was going to donate his entire salary to a charity when he said he was resigning. Didn't work a day in office from November all the way till like a few weeks ago. Then he surfaces, and get this, he removed his post that he was donating his entire thing from his website. So he actually removed it. So for the last 3 months, he could have at least donated the last 3 months that he was sitting at home doing nothing to a charity. And if he's going to come back, then start, like, if you're actually working, then yeah, get paid. But he hasn't been working at all. So that's how dishonest and disgusting this whole thing is.
They worship money. That's when you know, right? There's the sign.
Oh
right?
man, it drives me so nuts. And like, honestly, the thing I think about is like when they say we're all in this together, number one, they mean it. Number two, they ain't talking about us, right? They're talking about the gang of 300 of them up in Ottawa. And it just drives me sick. And you know what? Like, I really do think Dawson is courageous because, Mark, as you mentioned, the media was reporting that he was getting flack even from his own caucus, right? And this just makes me want to call them all out individually. Like, number one, let's start with the Liberals. The Liberal government could end the pay raise tomorrow, right? They could end it tomorrow. Not to mention, Carney just told Canadians to brace for sacrifices. Why isn't he telling his Liberal MPs it's time to brace for a little bit of sacrifice and say no to another helping of taxpayer cash? But it's not just Carney and it's not just the Liberals. Let's call it the Conservatives and let's call out Pierre Poilievre as well. Because look, under Pierre Poilievre, the Conservatives have rightly bashed wasteful spending and rightly bashed tax hikes. Well, why aren't the Conservatives standing with their own MP? Why aren't they standing up for taxpayers? Why aren't they being true champions for Canadian taxpayers and opposing this raise, right? This should be a political layup for Poilievre and the Conservatives. What's going on there? Or how about the NDP, right? Oh, we stick up for the little guy. Well, why aren't you calling out the pay raise to politicians that all make over 3 times more than what the average Canadian worker makes?
No, I completely agree with you. Actually, this would be a good opportunity to go back to the PBO situation. Now it's harder for them. Like, I mean, there's no tracking for costs now. Nobody's tracking like a professional. I mean, MPs, their job is not to review numbers. So they're going to try. But so what can Canadians do today, given that we found out 2 days ago the PBO expired? Personally, what I'm going to be doing is creating obviously lots of content to inform people, to notify their MP and say, this is unacceptable. And it doesn't matter if your MP is Conservative. They need to know that we can't allow this to happen. So if they go back to the House of Commons, they just don't stop talking about this situation. Like, it needs to. What can we do? That's the problem.
Yeah, and hey, let me just read a comment here because I just saw a great comment saying, oh, by the way, they're taking raises while they're raising taxes, right? It's actually the very same day, right, where they hike taxes and then they pad their pockets with extra pay, right? So tax hikes for you, pay raises for them. I just wanted to mention that comment I saw in the chat because that's a very, very right point. Yeah, so what can we do? On the PBO, you mentioned contact your member of parliament. Well, especially not if they're a Conservative too, right? Because right now the Conservatives are rightly against what's going on here. So what you actually should do as well, if you have a Liberal or NDP MP, email them and tell them how important it is to have a parliamentary budget officer right now. In fact, I would even email some of the party leaders. Like, I know Don Davies, he's the interim NDP leader. But send him an email. Get the NDP off the bench, right? Because then you have opposition from both the right and the left, right? So it's harder for Carney to ignore that. It's harder for media to not try to hold these politicians accountable. And then in addition to that, the one other thing I would say is, look, the MP pay raise on April 1, like, please, folks, if you're thinking of taking any action, please also send an email to your MP and be like, hey, why haven't you publicly opposed the raise? Now, folks, they're probably going to come back to you if they're not in the government. If they're like a Conservative or NDP, they'll probably say, oh, well, we can't do anything. It's out of our hands. Folks, do not buy that spin. Okay. They know that they can publicly oppose the pay raise. They know they can put pressure. They could even hold a press conference right in Ottawa. And guess what? If they wanted to hold a press conference in Ottawa, I would go there with them and we could do it together and we'd give them a lot of praise. So folks, do not buy their spin when they say they can't do anything about it. Also, if they tell you they're going to donate that raise to charity, that's not good enough anymore. They all make over $200,000 a year. They should donate to charity in their communities without billing you for more money. They've had years to fix this and they've just sat on their hands while collecting higher pay.
One thing I always think to myself is we need to change the way that the MPs get paid. They should be paid based on the average median household income across Canada, like whatever it is, $72,000, and you get a bonus if every single, say you improve the GDP per capita, which is how much money you make personally, not GDP. We don't care about that. We're talking about per capita. So each person in Canada, if they improve it by 5%, then they get a $25,000 raise or a bonus. Like, so actually make it so that you make the same as everybody else. But if you improve this condition for us Canadians, there's an incentive for them. And they get their bonus. They get their 200 grand if they improve it by 10%, or so that they're actually working hard for us. There's zero incentive for them to actually do the right thing.
And there should be penalties too. Like, I'm just going to state the obvious. Why should a finance minister get a raise when they're borrowing $80 billion?
Yeah, exactly. Franco, I have another question for you while I still have you, because we're coming up to the hour, and I believe that's we'll end it there. And by the way, thank you so much for both of you for coming on, because absolutely love these discussions. We should do it more regularly. I know we're quite busy, so Stacey, stay on us, please.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, come or message me, and I'll make myself available. The federal gun buyback program. Do you know any update on that? Or I mean, what I've heard is the whole thing's collapsing. Police services across Canada are refusing to participate. This thing's like almost $1 billion wasted. It's starting to collapse. So I'm just wondering if you've heard anything or if you have anything to say about this thing.
Oh yeah, it's okay. This might sound okay. It might be the dumbest thing the government has done. And that's saying a lot. Like, that's actually saying a lot. Like, it's a high bar when it comes to dumb stuff the government does. But this might be the dumbest, because look, folks, like, this specifically goes after law-abiding Canadian citizens. Specifically targets law-abiding Canadian citizens, right? It's not like criminals are going to be showing up to the RCMP office. Oh, hey, here's all the illegal guns, right? That's not what's happening. This is targeting law-abiding Canadians. And not only that, folks, like, you've even had the union for the RCMP say, not only will this not improve safety, it could actually make Canada less safe, because it diverts scarce police resources from actually going after the criminals, the gangbangers, the thugs, towards going after law-abiding Canadians. So it can make Canada less safe. It's going to be a huge taxpayer boondoggle. Mark, you rightly mentioned that the cost is pegged close to $1 billion. I've seen independent estimates say that this could probably balloon to north of $6 billion. The long gun registry back in the day massively went over budget. So I think this absolute boondoggle, the gun ban and confiscation scheme is going to be potentially north of $6 billion. Now, the update that I've seen most recent is you're getting even more police associations coming out against it. Right. We actually just saw the Ottawa police 2 days ago announce that they will not take part in the federal gun ban and confiscation scheme.
Yeah.
Not only that, but Hamilton hasn't, Durham hasn't. I've noticed Hamilton, Durham, and I think York just announced it too. Like, there's basically all of Toronto, the big ones in Ontario, like Hamilton, Durham, are huge regions. And I think Niagara region, they've also all announced, because I posted them on my Facebook too. Oops.
Nice.
I'm furious about this, because if you want to go get yourself a weapon, like a gun, you could get it. And it's the illegal type, the semi-automatic or whatever, that's coming over the border because the U.S. is the #1 carrier of guns on the planet, right south of us. They find a way to bring it across the border. That's the real problem, is these illegal. And guess what? When you eliminate the illegal ones, what do you think people are going to do? They're going to go ahead and get themselves the illegal ones that are highly dangerous, the ones that they don't want us having. The black market will flourish. That's what happens when you attack something. Something else pops up that's far worse. It's way better to have people get their licensing, follow the rules, and you know, it's been part of Canadian culture for forever. So what they're doing is going to cause an even bigger disaster. That's my opinion, but that's how it always happens in history. You go after something. Why do you think they legalized pot? It's because they realized that they can't combat it. And, you know, so then they did what they did. It's the same thing. You create a problem.
Create a problem and offer the solution. That's fascism 101.
Yeah, what is it? What is the old saying? The government breaks your leg and then hands you a crutch 2 sizes too small.
Totally. Isn't that the truth? You know, so Franco, we're almost at the end here. What's the biggest taxpayer issue for Canada right now that people should know about?
Well, the biggest one is got to be the debt. It's just so unfathomably, like, it's just so big, right? And we mentioned how the debt directly made life more expensive because you had the money printing that was financing Ottawa's deficits, right? You mentioned that the Trudeau government doubled the debt in 10 years, right? So Canadians' kids and grandkids are essentially going to be making payments on that debt for the rest of their lives. You know, welcome to Canada, folks, where every single dollar you pay in federal sales tax goes to pay interest charges on the debt. You know, Carney has talked about this massive increase in defense spending. Even after this massive increase in defense spending, the government is still wasting more money paying interest on the debt than what the Department of National Defense is going to spend through the main spending plan, right? Like, this is how bad of a situation that we're actually in. And, you know, as bad as Trudeau was, when it comes to the debt, it looks like Carney might be even worse, right? So between now and 2030, Carney wants to add about $320 billion to the debt, which is about twice as much as what even Trudeau was planning to add over those same years. So you asked me, like, what the biggest taxpayer issue is. I don't know how to not say the government debt. It's out of control.
Well, I think that there's clear signs that Canada is going bankrupt. I think when our institutions leave and our biggest industries leave, those are huge alarm bells. Huge. Like the Bay leaving, those motor companies leaving and closing down. Those are like, you know, like alarm bells that you need to leave. Like your country's going bankrupt. The Metrolinks, like all these things that we're just plunging money into, and we keep doing the same mistakes over and over again. Those are like signs of a nation in distress.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, Franco, I have another question here. I know you drilled it over and over again, but there might be some people that on the live that joined before you broke it down. But the role of the parliamentary budget officer historically, holding the government accountable, can you kind of paint how important this role is? And that could be one of the last things people have in their mind with this live stream.
The parliamentary budget officer is extremely important. Okay, so the PBO is the government's own independent, nonpartisan budget watchdog, right? It is like the one department that is punching above its weight for taxpayers, actually providing taxpayers with true government transparency and accountability. And it has been holding the government accountable, providing these very in-depth reports on the most critical taxpayer issues, right? When Carney said he was going to split the budget into two and then balance one half, the PBO rightly called out Carney for Carney's creative accounting. And the PBO caught Carney relabeling $94 billion of operating spending as capital investments, right? So the PBO called Carney out. Kudos to the PBO. Not just that, we all remember the carbon tax. We all remember Trudeau and all his little minions, telling people that the carbon tax made everyone richer. Well, the PBO sliced through that that spin. The PBO put out multiple reports showing that the carbon tax was costing average families hundreds of dollars more than the rebates they got back. It was the PBO that, showed the cost of the federal bureaucracy going up 80% in 10 years, that the compensation for the average federal bureaucrat is more than $140,000 a year. It's a PBO crunching the numbers, showing that there's a hidden carbon tax in Canada costing you 7 cents a liter of gas this year, increasing every year until 2030. It was the PBO that even called out Trudeau's digital services tax, that it would just make life more expensive in Canada. I mean, the PBO is such a staple for government transparency and accountability. And because Carney failed to hire a new PBO, we don't have a parliamentary budget officer at the moment. Its actual office can't produce these reports, can't put out this analysis. So we just don't have that accountability tool right now that Canadians need. And let me just end on two things. Look, at best, it's just pure incompetence for Carney. But at worst, and what I think is a little bit more likely, is just the government trying to avoid scrutiny. That's what it seems like. That is what it seems like. And I'll just say, instead of cutting the budget watchdog, the Liberals should just start cutting the debt.
Yes. And I'm going to add something to what you had to say to leave people with something to think about with the parliamentary budget officer gone. When the world looks at Canada and sees that we have zero accountability for someone watching over the government spending and debt, what do you think's going to happen to our AAA credit rating that they continue to tell us about? They're going to look at Canada having zero fiscal oversight, and our AAA credit rating is definitely at risk.
I just wanted to, I wanted to add, I think it's clear that I think the Liberals have a history of avoiding public scrutiny. I think they do it every time they are being scrutinized, just to come back to it. I think the public health minister wanted to hide the vaccine injury report for 15 years. So I think that whole party wants to avoid scrutiny entirely.
Absolutely. Okay, where can we follow you guys? Because you guys are fantastic. I highly suggest you follow both Stacey and Franco. I'll leave in the description section where you can find their handles. But where would you like everyone to follow you? Go ahead, Franco.
Let me just say, Mark, thanks, man. Really appreciate this. Stacey, thanks for always connecting us and all the support. I really appreciate it. Folks, if you want to learn more about the CTF, best place is taxpayer.com. taxpayer.com, or on social media, just type in Canadian Taxpayers Federation. My handle there on Twitter or X at Frankonomics, but best place is taxpayer.com.
And how can they support you, Franco?
Oh, there's a couple ways. Number one, join the email list. You get notifications when we're sending out email blasts to these politicians, putting up billboards, doing petition drops. Also too, always love a good donation, right? We've never will take a cent from any government. So the only way that we're able to keep the lights on is just from voluntary donations from Canadians. And
can people get tax credit for that?
We don't offer any tax credits. Nope.
Okay. Just to clarify, not you. I'm saying the government saying, hey, you donated to a good cause. Stacey,
donated to a very good cause. That's why I say I find them one of the only places where you can truly trust, where they're going to advocate for you. All some defense funds or other things you don't know. And Franco's works really, really hard. You see him out there all the time. I was just going to ask Franco, are you going to CPAC?
No, I'm not.
That's too bad. Just since everyone knows it's Canadian, because it's in Dallas this year. The Conservative Party is meeting in the end of Dallas, in March. So,
I love Dallas.
I know, and it's going to be super nice and super hot. It's too bad. So that's where I met Franco. But you can follow me on Twitter, and hopefully we'll catch up next month.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll touch base, and if you guys like this live stream, let me know so that we could continue to do these live streams. And thank you very much to the guests today. Thanks for the live stream, and thank you everybody that partook and watched the live stream today. Without you guys, we wouldn't create these live streams. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, guys.
That was fun.